Welcome back to Sandy and Sean. I'm Sean Drochar, live from Radio Row in Las Vegas, Super Bowl 58. Joining us, Mike Yam of NFL Network. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Absolute pleasure, man. We got all the fanfare, the hoopla, Radio Row. I'm sure you guys are having a blast.
Yeah, obviously it is fun in Vegas. This is a city that's been wanting this forever. It wasn't that long ago. There were no sports teams in Las Vegas, and the idea was verboten. And now, of course, you have teams of all varieties. The A's are coming as well. You know, it's a gold rush coming to Vegas, and now it's the perfect city to actually host a Super Bowl because it's built for this kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and over the years, it's funny because I've been here the last couple of years because the East-West Shrine Bowl was here in Vegas. It moved to Dallas this past season, but to me, there, and then all the years doing Pac-12 because we had our conference tournament here at T-Mobile. So it was a ton of fun. But you're right, this congregation of sports, because you're right. When we were younger, it's like it was so taboo.
Oh, right.
It's funny because I was watching yesterday on NFL Network. We were doing Roger Goodell's press conference, and I couldn't help but notice the amount of questions about betting and gambling. And look, I think that would have remained even if the Super Bowl wasn't here in Vegas. But I think to your point, there all of a sudden was more of these questions, I think, based off of the location of this year's Super Bowl.
Yeah, in fact, for those who are looking at this on video, if you could see all the way over there between me and Mike, there's literally NFL slot machines sitting at the end of Radio Row. So, Vegas is going to Vegas. That's just how it's going to work.
No question.
But before we get into the game, of course, you have been with the Pac-12 network for a while, and I would say former, but we're all former Pac-12 now, aren't we?
Yeah. It's sad to see. I would argue of all the sports stories that are out there, and I'm saying from a sports perspective, the demise and what we're seeing dissolving of the Pac-12 conference, I think is the saddest sports story you're going to see. The tradition, the history, the rivalries, West Coast dominance. To me, the fact that we're not talking about this league moving forward is it sucks. There's no other word to use.
Could you imagine if Washington had won the championship?
That would be the most Pac-12 thing ever to happen to the Pac-12. All the years, honestly, knocking on the door, the fighting the narrative of the teams being competent enough to go and win. I can't even tell you how many times, Sean, I was making the case for Utah being one of the premier teams in the NFL in college football, and yet still falling short. The success that Oregon has had over the years, it was sad. Hell, this is not too far removed from Mike McIntyre being the head coach there and playing for a Pac-12 championship against a really good team like Washington, still seeing some of those guys on that CU roster playing in the NFL. It's mind-boggling to me that this is the conversation.
Yeah, it really is kind of stunning in that regard. And now we're getting to these super conferences. You brought up the Buffaloes. Obviously, we covered them a lot on the program. And for
you've had something to talk about.
A little bit. And, the excitement, of course, this time last year, Deion Sanders was recruiting Hall of Famers, nieces, nephews, kids in the middle of the NFL honors speech last year and building all of that hype. Now, Colorado had fallen into irrelevance. This is a team that had won a national championship at one point, and they had fallen into irrelevance. I think that the Deion Sanders made them relevant again, and they had a hot start. But the truth is they crash landed. The season skidded to a halt in some pretty ugly fashion. But it's fascinating to see what Sanders is doing, and I'm curious to get your point on it because we talked about, you almost said NFL. Well, NIL is changing things dramatically, and Sanders seems to understand that selling it, maximizing it, coming to Colorado gets you eyeballs, which gets you paid. Even though the program itself had been irrelevant, relevance is back. But now, to stay relevant, you have to be good. Do you think that Deion Sanders, from what you've seen in the first season, can continue now looking with Pat Shurmur, presumably as offensive coordinator? They still haven't hired a defensive coordinator. Do you feel that this can be sustainable? Because we're at a point where Deion Sanders has never not coached his sons. And next year, that's going to come to an end.
To me, look, I don't know if he's long for this job. That was one of the concerns that I had when it was announced. But if you would have said to Rick George when he made the hire, this is what the path is going to be after the first campaign. We're going to be the talk of the sports world. The reality is every time I was at NFL Network and I look up at one of our monitors, it's one show from ESPN, it's another show from Fox. They were all congregating in Boulder. And I think anyone in your audience knows, I got to travel all over the West Coast and see a lot of the Pac-12 teams out there. Boulder was my favorite spot. If you go to that downtown, it's the perfect mix of having a little bit of life, a little bit of that college vibe. The resources are better. When I got to see you, I remember my first year, I was there with Rick Neuheisel. Rick would tell me the facilities that were there at that point, and this is 2012, 2013, were the same ones that Rick had when he was the head coach there. Now it's changed dramatically. Great practice facility, the upgrades to that locker room. things are in place here. And Deion, look, I think there's a lot of concerns of where college football is going right now, where it was. If there's one guy in the game that can capitalize on the current rules, whether it's the portal or it's NIL, it's Prime. And to me, that's the biggest reason why I think that team can have success.
I'm intrigued to see what you think about this as well, because it seems in the national side that there is this idea that he's not long for the job. He'll be going somewhere else. But let me offer a counterpoint. I'd like to see what you think about it. Deion Sanders is off the, I'm not making the direct comparison, but the Nick Saban Bowl by the time he retired, and he's not calling the plays on offense or defense.
Sure.
He's not calling plays. He's managing the clock. He's working the refs, but he's not calling plays on
CEO.
Right. But at the NFL level, that's not the same kind of thing. And Deion Sanders, I think, even understands he's not really an NFL coach, nor does he even have necessarily the interest in doing so, because the expectations are so different. So I think he's a good fit in college where he's going to stay and be able to maximize his ability.
Yeah.
The question is bigger programs. Of course, his name got floated when Saban retired. But if you're a program like Alabama, you don't necessarily need Deion Sanders. Colorado was desperate and basically handed over the keys, said, you drive the car. We need to be back to relevance. But I'm not sure if you're the Bamas, the Texases, the Ohio States, with these large alumni bases, this well-oiled machine, they don't need necessarily what Deion Sanders brings. And I'm not sure that he might not stay in Colorado longer than a lot of people think.
So I don't know if I wouldn't fight you to the death on it. The only pushback that I would have is the landscape is changing so dramatically that when Nick Saban rolls up and let's say he's still the coach at Alabama, there's a certain amount of cachet that comes with that, and players want to go there because he's my ticket to the NFL. And I think if I step back and go, all these dudes can immediately flip and enter the transfer portal, that's the equalizer to all of this. Yeah. And I think there's concerns about Kalen DeBoer, right? Does he have ties to Alabama? The answer is no. Is that a recruiting hotbed that he has had a ton of success with? The answer is no. But I don't know if that necessarily matters moving forward. And the equalizer when it comes to the portal and NIL, Deion, look, if Alabama wanted Deion, for example, he goes there, I think there's less questions about whether or not he can succeed because he's going to be able to pull all of those guys. Let's be real here. If he gets that job, is there the amount of exodus from 5-star recruits that all of a sudden are going to go to flip to Georgia? And the answer is probably
not. As if Kalen DeBoer's resume was not spectacular.
No question.
I mean, the win percentage is ridiculous, but you're right. That's part of it. Some of them, by the way, poking their heads over up in Boulder too as well. Let's switch to the Super Bowl. Of course, we're talking with Mike Yam of the NFL Network. This is a rematch of the Super Bowl a couple years ago, but there actually aren't as many players involved. You know, obviously you're talking about a lot of the key components, the coaches. You're looking at Patrick Mahomes, of course, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, but a lot of it's been overhauled. What have you made of the run from the Niners this year and then this late season run where it feels like the Chiefs at points of the season were sleepwalking through it because they know how good they are? And it, to me, has felt like Mahomes does Mahomes things. He's a wizard. But it's been Kansas City's defense that I think has really shocked people in the last month.
No question. It's a real flip in the identity of that team. And look, as we're here at Radio Row, I'm looking up, I see 15 on a huge banner and Travis Kelce. Those are the identifiable names. But the reality is, if you look at this team's defense, whether it's Jones up front creating havoc for opposing quarterbacks, if it's Trent McDuffie, another guy who's Pac-12 ties when he was at Washington, this defense is the biggest reason why they're here at this stage. To shut down a Ravens team the way that they did was remarkable and nothing short of spectacular. I look at that team going on the road and beating a Buffalo squad the way that they did. We're talking a Miami team. Off the top of my head, Sean, I think it's like 1, 4, and 6 in terms of the total offenses that defense shut down to get here. If that doesn't scare you as a Niners fan, I don't know what will. But I think you make a really good case that's not discussed nearly enough. This team from Super Bowl 54, this Niners squad, is not the same. We were doing this on NFL Network the other day. I turned to Brian Balding. I said, Baldy, look at the names of the dudes who were on this roster then or the roster now that weren't then. It's straight up like absolute beast. It's the Christian McCaffreys of the world. Brandon Ayuk. This team has invested financially. They got like the top. They got like 6 or 7 of the top 3 paid players at their respective positions. Right. So there's been a real financial commitment for this team to go and win. And I think it's got to be gratifying for that front office that they're 1 win away from the Super Bowl.
And it gives them an opportunity to have a quarterback on a rookie deal, which is how 100%. You can do that. And of course, the bill eventually comes due. So
And it will come to. And I think what's going to be fascinating.
It feels like the window's open right now, right?
100%. I mean,
you won't be able to keep everyone when you have to pay Purdy.
Yeah.
So that makes this interesting.
And I don't know if Purdy gets one of those massive mega deals the way the narrative is, but I don't know if San Francisco is here without Brock Purdy. So I think those who have continued to call him a game manager, I don't know how fair that is.
Is it a bad thing? I've looked at it. I'm not really sure when people look at it. Purdy drives the ball downfield at an average rate as high as anyone in the league.
100%.
So he's pushing the ball downfield.
Yeah.
It becomes now where defenses, I think, are very clear it's about turning the ball over, right? I mean, that's what you can't really stop offenses between the 20s. So you're hoping you kind of lock it down, holding the 3 when it could be 6.
Yeah.
You're trying to make sure that you can turn the ball over where you can and be opportunistic. So I think it becomes incumbent on quarterbacks more than it ever has
100%.
to avoid turnovers. We call that a game manager, but today that's winning football.
I love the way that you describe it. What we've been saying on Total Access recently is game CEO. I think it's an elevated way of looking at what Brock Purdy has done, because there is a negative connotation to just being that game manager. But you're right, not turning over the football is going to be key in this game, because the reality is if the Niners fall in a hole in the first half like they've done in these last 2 playoff games, that is so much of an uphill battle. I don't know if they can overcome that against this Chiefs team.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see. Obviously, Mike Yam with NFL Network. Where can they find everything? Of course, the NFL Network is omnipresent here this week, but you in particular, what should people keep an eye out for?
Absolutely. Social media at Mike_Yam. We got Total Access, which is the show that I get to work on throughout the course of the season. 7 Eastern time is when you can catch it on NFL Network.
Make sure you do that. Mike Yam joining us. Thanks so much from Radio Row. We will be back with more on Mile High Sports next.